Josh Welch, president of Film Independent, and welcome to Film Independent Presents, with a very special conversation today around the film I'm Your Woman. Before we get started, a couple thanks on my end. I want to thank our lead sponsor for Film Independent Presents, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Thank you so much to the HFPA for making this robust year-round program possible. Thanks also to our screening partner, Vision Media, which is how we do all of this. And last but certainly not least, thank you to our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. We love you. With that, it's really an honor today to be speaking with the filmmakers behind this fantastic film, which I believe drops today on Amazon. This is the premiere.
That's right.
Very exciting. Co-writer and director Julia Hart, producer Jordan Horowitz, and the star of this film and producer Rachel Brosnahan. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Of course. So congrats on the film. It's so beautifully done, and I have lots of questions for you about it. But just to go back and start at the beginning, Jordan and Julia, you co-wrote this project. Can you talk about the genesis of the film? What was the seed idea, and how did the early development come about?
So we, and first I'll just say thank you so much for having us, and hi, good morning, everybody. This was our fourth film that we made together, and I started out as a teacher and then moved into screenwriting, and Jordan produced the first screenplay I wrote, and then the second screenplay we wrote together, which was my first film that I directed, Miss Stevens. And so around the time that all of that was starting to brew, we were watching a bunch of 70s crime dramas, and also had just become parents.
Yeah.
And so I think I would have been anyway as a woman, but I think having just become a mother, I was particularly struck by the way in which the women in those films and the children are all shepherded off to safety when the action gets going. And they're all the characters in those movies are played by these incredible actors, like Tuesday Weld in Thief, and Diane Keaton in The Godfather, and Ally McGraw in The Getaway.
And they're very often great characters.
And they're great characters, yeah. They're flawed, complex, three-dimensional women, but they're only in a handful of scenes, or the story isn't about them or from their perspective. And so that was the germ of the idea for the character of Jean in the story of I'm Your Woman, was what if we shifted the perspective of those movies instead of being about the man and the criminal, but have the movie be about his wife and children.
And Rachel, when did you first get involved in the project?
I first read the script in 2018 and was just so moved by Jean's story and her journey, and have felt that way about other films, not just this 70s crime genre that so often these brilliant actresses and really interesting characters are make an impact in the short period that they're on screen, but are somewhat wasted in some of these films that we love so much, and was really struck by how firmly rooted in Jean's perspective this entire story is.
Yeah, I thought it was, I thought that aspect of it was so original and compelling. I mean, just hearing how all of you were talking about it, it's like, that really does cry out in the story by shifting the focus to her. I hope this isn't an annoying question or comment, but Rachel, I did find myself thinking of especially season 1 of Mrs. Maisel, where there's like the central protagonist is a woman surrounded by men who are like kind of, they have all the agency at first, but over the course of that show and in this film, it's like she is gaining her agency or gaining.
Sorry, small children screaming in the next room. Apologize, Andrew.
They're okay.
They're fine.
They're just screaming. Sorry, go ahead.
Fun screams, not scary screams.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, totally. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
I know, that's it. Just, yeah, any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There are definite similarities. This is also a story about a woman who's discovering a power inside of herself that was there all along and that she hadn't quite figured out how to wield. And I love stories like that. I also love stories about women who weren't expecting to change, and in some ways didn't want to change. And both of those stories share that in common too. There's also a lot of differences, obviously the characters, at least to me, feel polarly opposite, in that you have one woman who has this innate confidence that it feels like she was born with, who isn't afraid to use her voice, and who functions at a million miles an hour, who's outwardly funny and charming. And then you have this other woman who's endured this enormous trauma, whose voice has kind of been locked up in a box with everything else that has happened to her, and her dreams and her desires, and who's extremely cautious about how and when she uses it, and who is very thoughtful and sort of lost inside her head. And so while they are both ultimately and sort of simply stories about women discovering their strength and capability, if I could tell stories like that over and over and over again, I would. There's a million stories out there that have yet to be told about women discovering their power. And I love in this particular case that, arguably Midge is someone who is pretty extraordinary all around, and who has all the tools, even if she's never tried or wanted to change. And this is a woman who is ordinary, by a lot of accounts, and I appreciate that Julia and Jordan had the confidence to center an ordinary woman in the middle of a story like this too. Those stories are equally as valuable and worth telling.
Absolutely, yeah. I love how, especially in the first half of the film, I mean even longer, but in the first half, like the audience is with you. Like our experience of what's happening in the world is your experience, and it's completely baffling, and terrifying. Like there's all this crazy stuff happening, and violence, and you don't know what's happening, and we don't know. There's a sense of just like initially helplessness, of just like being at the effect of what's happening around you. And for the audience, I found it like, it made me really uncomfortable, but sorry, I've got puppies behind me here. It made me,
we all got stuff.
It puts the audience in a very vulnerable spot, and really uncomfortable, but also just pulled me in. And as the story unfolds and as you gain agency, so do we. One specific element I wanted to ask you about was something I love in this is your relationship with Cal, and that was, to me, was unexpected. Like when he came in, and just the scenes of you together. Again, like at first he's this guy who just comes out of nowhere. He's like another has some relationship to your husband, but it's not clear. But there's a clear relationship between the two of you that unfolds over the film. Is there anything I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that, as sort of how you approach that as an actor and what that was like?
Well, as an actor, that relationship is fairly simple, and also incredibly complicated, because my only job is to be present in the moment. Jean doesn't know anything about this person and is learning about him as the audience is. So my job is to sort of mirror the audience's experience of learning Cal. But I love their relationship because they are reluctantly put together, and they are reluctantly placed together, both in pursuit of their own survival. There's this sort of looming threat hanging over Cal's head as well. And they find that they need each other. I love how that unfolds. I love how curious Jean is about Cal, and how uninterested initially he is in learning about her. It's one of my favorite relationships. And I also, this is such a simple thing, but as a woman in film, I appreciate it so much that the idea of there being a romantic relationship is never on the table.
Right. Yeah. Well, another thing so then from Cal, then we meet his family, and I guess my next question is, I feel like the entire film is also, on another level, to me, it felt like it's a meditation on family. Like she wants a baby, and she's got this strange marriage and doesn't seem great, but then there's a mysterious baby appears. It's clearly a central theme there. And then she meets Cal, and then Cal's family, and like Cal's relationship to the baby, and then you meet his wife and his father. It's like I don't know. I guess maybe this is a question for Jordan and Julia, or for all of you. Is just if you could talk about that. Was that something you were thinking about with the film, of exploring the meaning of family and the importance of it to all of these characters?
Absolutely. And I love everything that you got from the movie. It's very exciting and rewarding hearing you talk about it, the discomfort, the being in Jean's perspective, and also that it is a meditation on family. You know, this is a woman who I think, even though we don't hear explicitly, it's very clear that she didn't have a great home life growing up. She doesn't have a great relationship with her husband. She's a woman who's been objectified and prized and valued because she was beautiful, not because she was worth loving. And so learned that, you know, the lesson from that for her was that maybe she wasn't worth loving. And then when she wasn't able to have a child, that was confirmed for her because she couldn't even create that love. And then throughout the course of the film, by watching this family, you know, it was so important to us that Cal and Terry's family be this family where the only thing that matters is that they're all worth loving and they all love each other. And the most important thing to them is loving each other and protecting each other. And Jean getting to witness that and getting to be brought into that and embraced by that, especially as a white woman who is such a threat to this Black family for so many reasons. Some of my most favorite moments of Rachel's performance in the film are the ones where she's just observing them as a family and observing their love. In particular, that, like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about that moment where she's watching. It's that beautiful shot. We linger for a really long time because we didn't want to cut away, of her watching Cal and Terry, their reunion and their embrace and their kiss, and just how overwhelmed she is by their love for each other, and how she ultimately realizes that it doesn't matter that she couldn't create a child. She has this child who loves her and who she loves. And that, you know, none of us get to choose the family we came from. None of us get to choose whether or not we can create life. Our bodies either do or they don't. Mm-hmm. And so I think ultimately the important message of that meditation on family to us is you can choose your family. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be the people who are related to you by blood. It's about choosing your community and the people who love you.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. And just to add a tiny bit more onto that is that you choose love and you choose to love. I think that's something that's really, especially as I've gotten older and have a family and just like I've been a person in the world, like I think we're trained a little bit, to get a little heady here, but I think we're trained a little bit growing up that like this idea of love is like, you know, soulmates and these things that like happen to you, and that you shouldn't have to work so hard for, you know, quote unquote, work so hard for love. But that doesn't mean love isn't a choice you make, and a choice you make every day, and learning to make that choice and learning to choose love. You know, there's that thing, choose love. And like, that really means choose love. And I think that it's something that you have to really kind of put in your body and learn to make that choice.
And the quotation that lived in the front of the script, we always like to put a quotation just to like set the reader of our scripts off on the journey from a writer far better than us. That always helps too. There's a James Baldwin quote in the front of the script. Love takes off the masks we fear we cannot live without, but know we cannot live within. And just this idea that we're all so guarded and so afraid of being vulnerable, but like ultimately we know if we're ever going to really be happy, we have to take off the mask and just be ourselves and choose love.
And choose love.
You know, picking up on extending this conversation about family, I have a question for Jordan and Julia, which is, I love it when film, like in independent film, there's a history of family members working together on film. You know, you have whether it's the Coen brothers or the Safdie brothers or, you know, Cassavetes and Jenna Rollins. Right? And you guys have done so many films together. Well, you've done 4 films together, I think.
It's our 4th, and we also made one
that I wrote.
That she wrote, that I produced. Yeah. So, yeah.
And so technically our 5th.
Yeah.
Anything you'd care to share about that? Just how you work together, or what's sort of the meaning of that for you as, you know, a couple and creative partners? I think it's so fascinating and inspiring to me.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. the I mean, we like something we like to say and think about is we always start from a place of collaboration, right? So because we're definitely
As
not
partners.
as partners, we're definitely not the type of people who like share one brain. We have very distinct and different brains. We just know how to kind of interlock them in a way. So we start from a place of collaboration. Everything that goes down on the page has gone through like an iteration of being batted around and wrangled in some way and interrogated in some way. But we also start from a place of family, right? So our collaboration emerges from family, and then we try to take that spirit outward, with all of our collaborators onto sets, into post, whatever we do, even into marketing at the studio level. Like we try to have. Rachel. Rachel dropped off. She was like, collaboration. I'm out of here.
I know she was having Wi-Fi.
Yeah, she'll be back. But yeah, so I think that for us, that really becomes a North Star. I don't know if you want to.
And we just, I mean, we feel really lucky. Like it's so special. We love. Hi. we love all the people we work with, but the fact that at the end of the day, we're getting to share that. We don't have to come home and like tell our spouse like this amazing thing happened at work today. Like I wish I could explain to you how it felt. Like we get to be there for that, and that's really special. And also, like from a practical standpoint, it's so great because so many of our friends in the industry who don't work together but are both in the industry have to split up their families a lot of the time when they go on location, and we like pack up the caravan and like all
move to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's
a bit
also
of a traveling
like,
circus.
Yeah, but like I hope someday they look back at their childhood and see the adventure in that, and that the important thing was that we all got to be together. And they're on set all the time, and I encourage the people we work with, when their families are visiting, to always have them come to set. And it just, I don't know, as you said, it's like starting from a place of family just extends outward to the whole thing feeling like family. And I think that's a really lovely way to get to work.
Yeah. So I have some questions on the production. I mean, first of all, it's a beautiful period piece. Like you guys capture the 70s and it doesn't feel like it's not over the top, like cool production design for the sake of it. Like it serves the story. But I was in awe of, I mean, the cars, the cars.
Us too.
Like, you have some wide shots on these streets where you see the whole environment, and there were a ton of cars. Like during the car chase towards the end, like that must have been a monster in terms of producing.
It was. Pittsburgh is an awesome place to shoot a period movie, especially 70s piece, because there's just a lot of stuff there.
But also like because it's a mid-budget movie. It's not a big movie, and that is a challenge for a period piece, especially one that requires the whole environment, as you say, to fit the period.
Yeah.
And so we were very lucky that so many of the locations, part of the reason we chose Pittsburgh is because Pittsburgh and its environs, so much has been preserved and is really like beautiful and well suited to the period. But also I have to give a shout out to our amazing art department. Also, our amazing first AD, Spike Tapuzian, like the dance of the choreography of cars, because we didn't have as many cars as it looks like we did, was truly impressive.
And also our amazing location manager, John Atkins, who found a lot of these places in Pittsburgh. He's really terrific. But yeah, we just had a really great crew on the ground in Pittsburgh, and got stuff done. But specifically the car chase, there's a city outside of Pittsburgh called McKeesport. That's where we shot that, which is just a city that's a bit trapped in time. It's unfortunate. It's one of those mill towns that, I think there was like they're called Tube. It was called Tube City. It was something, I don't know what a tube is.
It was like
a tube for something.
It was like a booming industry.
Yeah, one of the Nixon Kennedy debates was held there. So it was like a very booming, like high growth place in the 50s maybe. And then it just kind of fell off a cliff at some point. And everybody, everybody abandoned, and now it's relatively, I don't want to say empty, but
well, and that's one of the great
empty
things about the film industry is that we can go to a place like that and support it.
Yeah, for sure. We bring a lot of jobs there.
We brought a lot of jobs there. Obviously, you're also paying the city itself, and So that's always a wonderful part of this job, I think, is it's like literally supporting local
Yeah,
business.
but yeah, over 3 nights, we were able to kind of take over this small city and stage our chase there.
Wow. Well, it was fantastic. And I mean, the whole movie, I mean, that scene particularly, but everything, I just thought, I loved the venues. I mean, and where was that maybe in the same town where you have the outside shot of the nightclub? I forget the name of it.
No, that is East Carson Street on the south side of Pittsburgh, which is like one of the most lively,
Busiest
nightlife. Yeah. And it was like a miracle. I think it's the thing that John Atkins, our locations manager, is like most proud of in his
That we
entire
took
career.
over East
Because
Carson Street.
there
stage
are
someplace there, yeah.
dozens of businesses that make a ton of money every night.
Yeah.
Like it's just it's not now, sadly, but like when we were there, just packed all the time with people on the street and people in the bars and the restaurants and the clubs, and taking that over was a feat. And it was, I think we were allowed to have it from like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m.
Yeah, it was like deep night,
and it was also 17 degrees.
It was the cold. It was 70 degrees, but I think it like felt like 8 or something. It was definitely the coldest. It was the single coldest night of the
This
shoot.
woman was in a sequin jumpsuit.
Yeah.
But this is
least
where
we
we have
had,
to
like-
shout out our background actors, though. I mean, that shot is one of my favorite shots in the film.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a hard shot to get for a number of reasons, and they did it over and over and over again. And it's so good. But Pittsburgh is interesting because it's a lot like New York in that it's kind of block by block, and then there are places like on the outskirts that have been fully preserved, but you turn down one street and one street is frozen in time, and right around the corner there's a Starbucks. It's really interesting, and that's why, I mean, our locations folks were so incredible, just finding those gems all over the place.
That shot of people fleeing the nightclub is a beautiful shot. As I was watching, I was like, oh my God, how many extras did they have? Like
A
I
lot.
think we
lot.
Yeah, we had like 300 or so. And then, for the inside of the club too.
Yeah.
Those
They
were
were
the 2 biggest
amazing.
extras days.
They were so amazing. They all came. They looked great. They had their like 70s-esque outfits. They danced all night and then ran into the street.
By take 10 of the 8-degree night, though, they were just like, we're kind of done now.
We're good.
They stuck it out.
They just
Well,
stuck it out.
because
We got a shot.
it was also that we had shot inside, and that was kind of another really incredible camera trick where the club was huge and we actually did not have enough background to really fill that space. So I'll never forget it. There was like a strip down the middle where the act was happening, and our Bryce Fortner was kind of following along and, very carefully framing, and everyone was just running back and forth across the room. Everyone was just sort of running back and forth. It was very funny to watch, but it turned out really beautifully.
Yeah. If you were watching, because there was a balcony, if you were watching from the balcony, you're like, how is this going to look like anything? But then you look through the frame and you're like, oh yes, it totally works.
Movie magic.
Total movie magic.
Rachel, I have a question for you on the producing front. So I saw on this film you have a producer credit, and I'm curious, why did you want to do that? How did that come about? And more broadly, are you interested in sort of moving forward producing as well as acting? And
Yeah.
what does producing mean to you?
Yeah, so I had been interested in finding a path towards producing for a number of reasons. The primary being that I was interested in having a little bit more control over the kinds of stories that I was telling. Was feeling quite frustrated by the kinds of scripts that were coming across my desk. I still felt like I was going to reach. There was an invisible level of success that you reach where the kinds of roles that were available for women suddenly change. And I've come to the conclusion that it either doesn't exist or I'm not there yet. But I was just feeling very frustrated. Then I read this beautiful script, and I was so thrilled to have any part of it, and then even more thrilled that Julia and Jordan had created space for me to step into this role. And I have to say about these two, we've all spent the last couple of years especially, but a number of years talking about the kinds of changes that we want to see in our industry. And so much of that conversation centers around who occupies positions of leadership, who we're inviting to have seats at the table. And these two continue to put their money where their mouth is. And I am the beneficiary of having been invited to have a seat at the table, and not only to have that seat, but to really earn it. And I'm immensely grateful. And moving forward, yes, this was an incredible experience, and I'm so lucky to have had an amazing mentor in Jordan as a really experienced producer and a really smart and thoughtful one, and feel like I've learned an incredible amount and still have a ton left to learn, and still am looking forward to fighting for that elusive balance between wearing both hats. But I'm really excited to keep heading down this path.
That's great. I want to go back. Another question just on kind of the core of the film and the story and characters. One thing I wanted to ask about was, with the exception of one scene when they get pulled over by a cop fairly early on, race is never explicitly discussed in the film, but it's clearly a central element of this, that your character, Rachel, is, when you discover that family, it's a Black family, and the people that you're with through the core of the film, it's through their eyes as well that we're kind of experiencing the world. And I thought it was so interesting that it's never mentioned, but it's clearly key to the story. I mean, maybe Julie, I'll start with you. Could you talk about that in terms of the writing? Was that there from the beginning? If you could just talk through that element.
As much as we were, and it's funny because in that scene, nobody says anything about race, but It's just so obvious that that's what it's about, which is something that is really important to us when we do explore race and the intersection of the relationship between different races. It's really important to us that we not be explicit about it, because oftentimes I think in terms of authenticity, like that's not how it goes down in real life. It's often not said, often nothing is said explicitly, certainly in the 1970s. It's something that was, as much as we were interested in this meditation on family and centering a woman in the crime genre, we were also equally interested in exploring the other characters that aren't often centered in those films, and in this case, a Black family, and the way in which they were affected by the white men who had more power in ranking than they did in the crime world. And I'm really interested as a white woman and as a white filmmaker in intersectionality. And so, Kimberly Crenshaw obviously hadn't coined the term at the time the film is set, but obviously white feminism and the Black Power movement were all intersecting at that time. And I thought part of what would be interesting about Jean discovering her place in the world as a woman would be her discovering her place in the world as a white woman, and watching and learning from the experiences of the Black characters. But that was something from the inception of the script that was really important to us in terms of recentering a lot of people whose stories haven't been told.
It's so interesting to hear. I love films from that era. It's a favorite genre of mine and a favorite period. But I love. I mean, everything you're saying, it speaks to me. And I like Eddie is almost a MacGuffin. Like he's there at the beginning, and like in the original back in the 70s, it would have been his story. We'd see everything through his eyes, and he's the guy driving the story. And like here, we don't know anything about Eddie. He's just like, mixed up in some stuff. And the shift to the Black family and to Rachel's character is I think so original and compelling. And also that the family is like multi-generational. Like there's a grandfather in the family.
Yeah.
Like,
Frankie Faison.
In a 70s crime film. And it's like,
and he's also the best with the baby. I mean, everybody in the movie.
Yeah.
Well, we have a ton of questions. I could keep asking questions. Also, we have a lot of questions from our audience, so I'm just going to start. At the top, we have a question from Cole Needham, who says, "Congratulations on the film, loved it. Question for Rachel: when crafting the performance, did you take any inspiration from any specific movies or performances from that period? Did you go on a 70s binge watch?"
Yeah, a little bit. The biggest film, it's that push-pull. I'm a big research nerd, and given the space and the time, I would do the deepest dive. But in this particular film, it also felt important to recognize that Jean is someone who has been so sheltered from this world around her. And so I was trying to like hold back a little bit on doing the super rabbit hole dive that I love so much. But after our very first conversation, Julia mentioned checking out the movie Thief, which I had never seen, and am so glad that I had the opportunity to, and can completely see how that movie inspired in some ways this germ of an idea. And I'm obsessed with Tuesday Weld and her brilliant performance in this film. And then she disappears. And I felt that same thing where I was like, wait, I see an entire movie about her. And the beautiful diner scene between the two of them. I held on to a lot of that viewing experience heading into this film. And then there are so many other ones that I still have yet to see. I'm embarrassed to say that I've never seen Gloria, and that's next for me.
Gloria's great.
Yeah.
It's not the best Cassavetes film, but it's worth watching.
Sure.
And she's amazing.
There's a lot of best
It looks
Cassavetes.
amazing. I mean, I definitely went down the clip of Gloria.
Yeah.
Right? I've never seen it, and I'm
she's amazing, but she's always amazing.
Next question from Yusuf Al-Waeli. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Yusuf. Yusuf says, obviously COVID has really affected the movie business in the world. Do you think, and how do you think streamers like Prime Video have helped keep the industry afloat?
I'll take that. Well, it's interesting. I'm trying to think about like what angle I want to hit this from. Like certainly in the short term, we were able to go into quarantine knowing that we were still going to be able to release our movie out into the world, which was a real.
We were still in the middle of post-production.
Yeah. We were like just past Julia's director's cut when everything kind of shut down, and we had to finish the movie distanced. We cut from our house, or we didn't cut from our house. Our editors cut from their houses, and we collaborated with them over using various tools. We did a distance mix. We colored the movie from iPads. So like there was a lot of distance and quarantine finishing up the movie.
More than once.
What's that?
What?
I watched the movie on my iPhone more than
yeah, exactly. And then it was never in question about when the movie was going to come out or how it was going to come out. Obviously, there wasn't going to be theatrical the way that we had hoped there would be. There weren't going to be festivals the way that we hoped that there would be. And we had to change a number of those decisions and pivot and do what we thought was best in the moment, which, who knows. But in terms of having an end game and knowing the movie was still going to come out, we always had certainty of that because Amazon was always going to exist. People are streaming. It is what it is. I think what's happened over the course of the past 8 months or so is it's just accelerated what was happening pretty organically anyway. What would have taken 3 to 5 years took 8 months essentially. I'm of the opinion that movie theaters aren't going away. I think movie theaters need a lot of help right now. I think a lot of places need a lot of help. I think our government is failing quite a number of small businesses during this time. So that's a whole separate conversation. I don't think movie theaters are going anywhere. I think that they will stick around. I think people will go see movies. I think the way people see movies might change. But, it's interesting. The business model of streamers is very different than the theatrical business model. And I think it's no coincidence that this particular fall, you're seeing a lot more movies that are both fronted by women and people of color and also have a lot more women and people of color behind the camera. I think that has a lot to do with the business model of these streamers, which is much more forward-looking because it's much more about finding new subscribers and going deeper into existing subscriber base and making movies for any number of, I don't want to say niche markets, but a lot more targeted markets, as opposed to looking back and saying, what are the comps that have worked in the past and how can we replicate that, which is much more what the theatrical business is about, especially the independent theatrical business, which is about, which is about domestic sales plus foreign sales. And foreign sales are also very backwards looking in terms of comping what's come before and people who've worked before in those marketplaces. So, that shift in the model certainly affects quite a bit of what gets made and then also how things get seen.
I think ultimately what you're saying, just to call it out, is that box office like studios requiring box office numbers, they can't take risks and they can't do new things. And by comps, he means what's succeeded before.
Yeah.
And because for most of the history of our industry, white men were telling stories about white men, all the comps are stories about white men starring or made by white men. And so part of what's so thrilling to me as a female filmmaker and someone who is interested in seeing more diverse, inclusive content, movies, television, whatever it is that that doesn't exist. Like, we're creating the new comps right now for streaming services. And I think that's so exciting and like about time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that television rocketed past features in terms of representation for a minute, because television, was converting to that model much quicker than films were, and now it's all happening that way. So I think you'll see a very similar thing happening. I don't know if Rachel.
It also gives audiences the opportunity to continue to discover projects that they love. One of my favorite parts about streaming, and also having been on shows that were not created for streaming that have landed on streaming platforms, is that years after something ends, years and years after a movie is made, sometimes projects can continue to find new audiences. And that's really exciting. That's not necessarily anything to do with the business model. It's just thrilling. And it also, as it feels like the world is changing faster and faster and our tastes are changing and what we're wanting out of our projects are changing, it also gives us the opportunity on those streaming platforms to look back and find things that we overlooked and create new things to honor them. Or the opposite, or to look at things that were once heralded as extremely successful and recognize the ways in which they're not serving us anymore. But it's exciting to have this library that feels accessible to so many people in a way that it hasn't been previously.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an incredible moment we're living through right now, where, I mean, yeah, with the streamers, I do feel like reaching in that longevity of being able to discover this content over a long period of time, and also, I mean, Jordan and Julie, what you were saying about diversity of stories, both on screen and behind the screen, I'm seeing much more of that from this. Like at Film Independent, the filmmakers that we're working with, 10 years ago, the model would have been you make your micro budget feature, you take it to Sundance, you get picked up by Sony Classics, and that still happens, but like
to a point. I mean, it was always winning the lottery. At any time, it was winning the lottery. It's so, yeah.
Now we see young filmmakers like coming out of our labs or out of our mentorship program that we do, where they're getting a deal. Not everybody, but they're just much more. It's like TV or streamers. They get an opportunity at Netflix or Amazon or Hulu, where it's just like it's a different path, and the stories are so diverse, so rich, and it's not independent film, but aesthetically it is, and there's creative.
Yes, I mean, I certainly I very much came out of independent film. Everything I do, I still bring the ethos of independent film.
Yeah, and I think independent film has definitely just become a descriptor of a type of storytelling. It is obviously also literally defined by where the financing comes from, of course, but that feeling I don't think will ever be lost. And it's one of my favorite feelings when I'm watching a movie, is feeling like, oh my God, like, who is this person? What is this discovery that I'm getting to have? It's one of the most exciting parts of consuming movies. And I don't think that'll ever go away. If anything, I think we'll get to have more of it.
Well, this year we'll get back to the movie, but I do understand the Spirit Awards, for the first time, we're introducing television categories into the show.
I saw that, which is so cool.
Really?
I'm very excited about it, but we're gonna figure it. This is like our trial year, like launching it. But there's so many great independent filmmakers working in TV, not just for the paycheck, the way it was maybe 15 years ago, but because they get to tell these original, authentic stories.
Totally.
So, okay, back to the comments. So of the comments that have come in are just congratulating you all and saying how much they love the film. So I'm not going to read all of those.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Zach. You can read all of them, actually. That'd be wonderful.
There's a great question here from Jamie Wolf, who says, can you talk about the title of the film? I had the same.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, it's again, going back to our beloved Thief, Michael Mann's first movie, which, to anyone watching, if you haven't seen it, it is such a special film. I mean, talk about like discovering a new voice. I mean, Michael Mann is obviously one of our most prolific and celebrated living filmmakers, and this is his first film, and it's just electric. And there's a line in the film where Tuesday Weld says to James Caan, "I'm your woman and you're my man." And I loved the idea of paying respect to the film that so deeply inspired this one, but also this idea of belonging and possession. I mean, we talked about the family you're born into versus the family you choose, and the way in which women, especially in that era, but today, unfortunately, continue to be objectified and treated like possessions a lot of the time. That at the beginning of the film, she's Eddie's woman, and then by the end of the film, she's her own woman. And also to clue into the way in which the audience, as you mentioned earlier, is so deeply rooted in Jean's perspective. She's also theirs as well.
Perfectly said.
Question from, where did it go here? Oh, question from Lindsay, who says, can you speak a bit about the club scene and the decision process behind the coverage? The shot in the phone booth behind Jean was captivating.
Awesome, thank you. I haven't really gotten to talk about this explicitly, but I love the way that, Lindsay, you just asked that question, because it allows us to really talk about this. It was so cool because the location for the big dance hall part of the club had these other rooms off of it that we could stitch together through camera and editorial to make it look like they were all connected, but actually they weren't. We built the hallway in 3 separate locations within that, outside of that main dance hall. And it was so cool because we did a pre-scout in June before we started real full prep in August of 2019.
Yeah.
And Jordan and I, we found this dance hall. We were like, this is perfect. We love it. But the other spaces don't quite work as scripted. Jordan and I literally stood there in that pre-scout and shot listed that entire sequence so that we could decide whether or not the location worked. We were like, okay, we could shoot this part of it out in this hallway, and then we could create half of that hallway off of this room, and then that could connect to and it's exactly as we like faux shot listed it on our own that day, like months before we were ever shooting it. And that's also like one of those movie magic things where like it looks seamless, and it's so funny that you're just kind of standing there like working it out in your brain, and then all of these amazing artists have to go build that and secure that, and our amazing camera department, our DP and our operators shoot it, and then our editors cut it together. And it's one of the most, I always find those challenges to be the most fun parts of filmmaking. Like sometimes you walk into a location and it's perfect, but that doesn't make your job like cool, it's perfect, we can just shoot it. But there's something so much more thrilling about having to figure it out. And
at the script level, I mean, the film theory aspect of it, I think, is more, it's just more to what we were saying at the beginning about perspective, and just about experiencing what we sort of know is happening in the other room, but experiencing it from someone who is terrified and doesn't know what's happening. And we found, as with any number of things in this movie, we tried to subvert certain set pieces and present them from a different perspective, and putting her in the phone booth felt like yet another opportunity to do something like that.
And that was such a good idea because we loved trapping Jean in all of these small spaces. There's obviously the phone booth, there's the closet at the safe house, there's the whole underground in the cabin, and just the way in which, just the metaphor of like women being, boxed in or trapped or hidden. But the phone booth was your idea, and that's one of my favorite things too, because it's so 70s, like it's so the period. Like I wonder if there are going to be young people watching this movie being like, what is that?
No.
Another question from Cooking Cam, who says, congratulations on the film. As a lover of the thriller genre, it was a treat to see one with a female lead. Question for Rachel, was this your first time shooting a gun in a film? What kind of rehearsal did you go through for those scenes?
It was not actually my first time, although strangely enough, many years ago, I shot another film in Pittsburgh, which was actually my first time. Yeah, probably like 12 years ago, something crazy. I am not a I don't like guns. I find one of the scariest things for me is being inside of a gun range, actually. So I was petrified, but thankfully had a very wonderful teacher who was very patient with me and incredibly safe. But thankfully also as an actor, Jean is not an expert, and I appreciated the more realistic representation of someone learning how to use a gun in a genre like this, because I do find sometimes that in any kind of action genre, a character gets handed a gun and 2 scenes later, they're like, pew, pew, pew. You know, they know exactly how to use it and they've transformed into a badass. And I really loved and fought for us to be able to use the blank in that scene where Jean shoots the gun, because it was so loud, it scared the shit out of me every time we shot it. And I love that for Jean.
One of my favorite moments, we just stayed in that shot. Like that profile of you firing that gun is like one of my favorite moments in the movie. It's so incredible. And one of my favorite moments within that moment is when I can't remember if it was the first shot or the second shot that Jean makes. Bryce, our DP, who also operates a lot of the film, the camera, like it scared him too.
He just couldn't keep still.
And and there's just like, that's the kind of stuff you just like, it's such a gift
this,
to just feel like, again, just so being with Jean, like everyone was just so with you, including Bryce.
Yeah, we couldn't stay in that shot long enough.
Yeah.
But that's
But it was helpful to even have, there was a small pistol that Terry gives Jean, and it's a real gun. It was obviously empty when we shot with it for the most part, but it was heavy, and it was just even that brief period of gun training, even though I had shot a gun before, is a reminder of how powerful these weapons are, and it makes you walk differently and move differently. Even just, I carried that gun in my pocket almost always, even when you couldn't see it, because it does affect the way you move and the way you feel. They're incredibly powerful weapons, even one that's only this big.
Many more compliments on the film are coming in. Back on the gun, one person says, it was so shocking the way you shot him so quickly at the end that this person jumped, he or she. That was a great moment. It was very quick, but yeah, that was. I want to say this is really off topic, but I like everyone, I'm binge viewing all kinds of stuff during this crazy pandemic, and I finally started watching Blacklist, which I'd never seen before. And I don't know if you fire a gun in that, but you are so badass in that show. I've never seen before. And I was like, oh my god, she's very
so fun. Wow, what a blast from the past.
I'm going way back. Another comment, Fast Color is an awesome movie. Didn't realize that Julia did that as well.
Thank you. We both did.
Yeah.
And then somebody said that they loved the Richie Havens song in the film, which I think is a great moment. Could you talk a bit about the music in the film?
Oh yeah, it's like my favorite thing to talk about. Music is, I love movies, obviously, but music is probably my most favorite art form. And I think part of that is that I'm like the least musical person on the planet. So it's just this like mysterious, magical force to me. And when I think about my favorite movies, the moments that always rise to the top of my memory are when the perfect needle drop is put to the perfect image. To me, there's just nothing more transcendent in a film. And so I love writings. I think every one of our movies have needle drops written into the script that either the characters sing or are dancing to. So it's something that I love and feel very lucky to work with Dan Wilcox, our amazing music supervisor, who's also a KCRW DJ. And he is equally good at getting the rights to huge songs like Aretha Franklin's cover of Natural Woman as he is at finding those little hidden gems that you have to tuck into the back of a diner scene that are still evocative of the era. So yeah, it's something and that Richie Havens song, I think he pitched that, right?
one. Yeah, we had something else there, and he
Follow
pitched that.
Oh, it's such a gorgeous
song. Natural Woman. So that moment with Rachel, with you and Cal singing that in the diner, and then the song coming. That was such a great moment. I didn't realize Dan was music supervisor on this. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
He's-
also did Miss Stevens and Fast
Yeah,
Car.
he's done all of our movies except for the Disney movie.
Because they have their own
Yeah.
folks who are also amazing.
It's true.
Well, I feel bad. There's questions here that are going unanswered, but I think we have. Thank you so much for your generosity, your time. I think we've got some hard outs here. People need to get to other things, but Julia, Jordan, Rachel, thank you so much. Congrats on the film. Everybody, if you haven't already seen it, tune in. It is on Amazon starting today, December 11th. Spread the word at Film Independent. We will spread the word. But congrats on the film, and thank you so much for being here and talking with the Film Independent community about it.